Ever seen your dog barking at the other dog in the mirror? Or your cat giving that cold, "Who are you?" stare? Turns out, science actually uses this awkward moment to test animal intelligence.
It's called the mirror test, and while chimps and dolphins can pass, your pet, probably not. But here's the catch. The test might be unfair. It wasn't even designed for dogs and cats in the first place. So, are our pets really failing? Or is science asking the wrong question?
To really understand this, we need to rewind to 1970. That's when Gordon Gallup, an American psychologist, came up with something that would change the way we look at animals forever. Gallup was fascinated with evolution and behavior, not just in humans, but in other primates and animals. He wanted to dig deeper into the question, are animals aware of themselves as individuals?
And that's exactly why Gallup's idea became such a turning point in science. For the first time, researchers weren't just asking, can animals learn? They were asking, do animals actually know who they are?
That subtle shift changed everything. Because if an animal can recognize itself, then we're talking about a deeper kind of consciousness, something closer to what we consider uniquely human.
Of course, not everyone agreed with Gallup at the time. Some thought it was too abstract or even impossible to measure. But that didn't stop the test from becoming one of the most famous experiments in psychology and animal behavior.
And today, decades later, the mirror test is still at the center of debates about animal intelligence, emotions, and even the nature of consciousness itself.
So, what exactly is the mirror test?
The mirror test is an experimental method designed to figure out whether an animal can actually recognize itself in a mirror. It was first developed by Gordon G. Gallup back in 1970, and it quickly became a classic in psychology and animal behavior.
The basic setup is pretty simple. You expose an animal to a full-length mirror for several days, sometimes even up to 10 days for chimpanzees. At first, most animals react as if they're seeing another individual. They might show social behaviors like curiosity, aggression, or even playfulness.
But over time, something interesting happens. In species that recognize themselves, those social responses fade away and are replaced with self-directed behaviors.
For example, they might start grooming parts of their body that they can only see through the mirror. That's a clue they're connecting the reflection to themselves.
And then comes the key part, the mark test. While the animal is under anesthesia, researchers place a harmless mark, say a red spot, on a part of the body the animal can't normally see, like the forehead or an ear.
When the animal wakes up, researchers watch closely. If the animal repeatedly touches, inspects, or tries to investigate the mark while looking in the mirror, that's considered solid evidence of self-recognition. In other words, the animal isn't just reacting to another creature in the mirror. It realizes, that's me, and something about me has changed.
And now comes the big question. What about dogs and cats? How do our closest pets react?
So basically, while dogs totally fail the mirror test, the "who's that handsome pup" in the reflection moment, they might actually recognize themselves, just not with their eyes.
Exactly. Dogs live in a world ruled by smells, not mirrors. For them, the real selfie isn't on Instagram, it's in a sniff of their own pee.
Well, here's where things get interesting. If you've ever placed a mirror in front of your dog or cat, you've probably noticed something strange. Many dogs bark as if there's an intruder on the other side, or wag their tails, eager to play with this new friend who mimics their every move. Scientists came up with this brilliant idea. Forget mirrors, let's give dogs an olfactory mirror. They put samples of each dog's urine into little canisters. Some were pure dog, and others had a twist, like their own smell mixed with an extra odor.
And guess what? The dogs spent way more time sniffing the modified version of their own scent than the plain one.
It's like they were saying, wait a second, this is mine, but something's off here.
Which is pretty wild because that reaction suggests a form of self-recognition, not in the "I look fabulous in this mirror" kind of way, but in the "hey, that's me, and somebody messed with it" sense.
And to double check, researchers also gave them scents from other dogs, both familiar and total strangers. Surprise, surprise, they sniffed those even longer than their own because, let's be honest, dog gossip is always juicier when it's about someone else.
Oh, totally. Then they ran a second experiment to make sure the dogs weren't just reacting to novelty. And turns out, nope, the dogs really were interested in the modified version of their own scent.
So, in a way, this was the canine version of the mirror test, just adapted to their super smelling world. And it shows that dogs do recognize themselves, just not by sight, by sniff.
Now, if dogs don't exactly pass the mirror test, what about our mysterious feline friends? How do cats react when faced with their own reflection?
Well, let's just say, not with deep philosophical insight. Cats easily fall into a few classic categories: cautious curiosity, defensive, who's that cat mode, complete indifference, or full-on social interaction, like they've just met a new neighbor.
Exactly. Most cats start by creeping up to the mirror, pawing at it, or trying to peek behind it, as if they're convinced there's a parallel universe cat trapped inside.
Which makes sense because cats don't actually recognize themselves in the mirror. Instead, they treat the reflection like it's another feline intruder. And after a while, typical cat move, they just get bored and ignore it.
But here's the sciencey twist. Cats rely way more on smell and hearing to understand the world. That's why the reflection feels incomplete to them. There's no smell, no sound, just a silent cat copycatting their every move.
And don't forget, cats' brains are wired to focus on movement and contrast, not fine facial details like humans. So to them, the mirror is more of a weird moving picture than a "hey, that's me" moment.
But hold on, just because cats flunk the mirror test doesn't mean they're clueless about themselves. Far from it. They show amazing self-awareness in other ways, like knowing exactly how much space they need to leap gracefully onto your keyboard, or distinguishing their own scent from another cat's.
Which basically means cats don't need a mirror to know who they are. They've got their own cat-centric version of self-awareness. And honestly, that feels very on brand for them.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to stay updated with this side of science.
Well, let's start with the obvious ones. Chimpanzees. Gallup himself showed that they have a highly developed sense of self-awareness.
Other great apes, like bonobos and even gorillas, have also shown similar abilities.
But it's not just primates. Some marine mammals also pass the test.
Exactly. Orcas, for example. They're incredibly intelligent with complex social structures and even dialects. Studies have shown they can recognize themselves in mirrors just like dolphins.
Now here's the twist. It's not just the usual suspects.
Yep. In 2019, researchers in Japan discovered that even a fish, the cleaner wrasse, could do it.
Wait, a fish? That's wild.
I know. At first, these fish attacked their reflection aggressively as if it were another rival. But over time, their behavior changed. They began to swim quickly toward the mirror, stop suddenly, and examine themselves, almost as if they realized, oh, that's me.
Birds, too, have surprised scientists.
Magpies were the first birds known to pass the test, but more recently, even roosters have shown self-recognition.
A study in Germany found that roosters, which usually crow to warn their group of predators, stayed completely silent when alone in front of a mirror, almost as if they knew they weren't really warning anyone.
And just when you think the list is complete, snakes enter the story.
Snakes? No way.
Oh yes, a recent study with royal pythons and garter snakes showed signs of self-recognition, but in a very different way than the traditional mirror test. It wasn't about visual recognition, it was about responding to changes in their own scent.
So from chimps to dolphins, fish, birds, and even snakes, the mirror test keeps surprising us. So, do animals really have consciousness?
That's the big question scientists have been debating for decades.
Even Stephen Hawking believed they do. In fact, in the Cambridge Declaration, he stated that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness.
And that's where the mirror test comes in. Because if animals can recognize themselves, it could be a sign of that self-awareness we link to consciousness.
But here's the problem. It's not that easy to prove.
Exactly. For one, running this kind of experiment in the wild is almost impossible.
And in captivity, animals don't always behave naturally. That can make their responses unreliable.
Plus, with certain species, it's really hard to repeat the test under the same conditions.
But here's where things get a little tricky. Some experts argue the mirror test may not be as reliable as it seems. Why? Two main reasons. First, just because an animal doesn't react to a mark on its body doesn't necessarily mean it didn't recognize itself. And second, recognizing a reflection isn't the ultimate measure of intelligence.
Exactly. Think about it. The test itself is built on an anthropocentric view, that is, it assumes animals will react the way we humans do. But that's not always the case. An animal might notice the mark and simply not care. Or it might recognize itself but feel no need to check the mirror.
And then there's instinct. In some territorial species, just seeing another individual in the mirror is enough to trigger alarm bells. They'll act aggressively, not because they don't recognize themselves, but because their first reaction is intruder. They don't stop to consider other explanations because in their world, there's no reason to assume a reflection equals me.
Which means sometimes the results are inconsistent, even contradictory.
So the mirror test might be famous, but it's far from perfect.
So, what does all this mean? If your dog barks at the mirror or your cat just stares and walks away, it doesn't mean they failed at being smart.
It just means the test wasn't really designed for them. Imagine judging human intelligence only by how well we can sniff out food. Dogs would destroy us in that exam.
Exactly. Intelligence comes in many forms: sight, smell, sound, even problem solving. Mirrors are just one tiny piece of the puzzle.
And honestly, maybe the cats do recognize themselves in the mirror and just don't care enough to prove it.
Which, knowing cats, sounds exactly like something they'd do. If you loved learning how pets totally fail or ignore the mirror test,
Hit that like button, subscribe, and join us for more fun and curious science about our furry friends.
because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of how hilarious and brilliant our pets really are.
Follow along, your pets will thank you. Or totally ignore you, like with mirrors.